Power on.
Real-time Sovryn is go.
Woo, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, here, but not alone. As I don't like being alone. I don't think anybody. No, that's not true. There are people that like being alone, and that's okay. I'm being joined by none other than. I mean, this is the thing with Real-Time Sovryn. One of the things I wanted to do with this originally was be able to bring in just some of the best people I know, and or some of the most interesting people I know. Now, I think Sek falls into both categories. Some people might debate the interesting part, but I'll take them to task. But I am being joined by Sek McGora of the Agora podcast, which also has had new episodes come up recently, which is really exciting. Sek, man, welcome to Real-Time Sovryn.
Hey, man, thanks for having me back. Glad to be here. And I'm not that interesting, really. I'm pretty boring.
No, you're interesting as hell, and I know we're going to get into quite the subject here. Like you said, you were on previously, and we started to get into the topic of technology as a net negative, and I think we're going to get into that more today because again, we didn't get too deep on it last time, but I will link in the show notes to that previous episode so people can check that out. But all right, hold on. Before we get into anything, I was just talking about being alone. Sek, did you ever go to the movies much like to the theater?
Years ago. I've been going more recently. I've got
really
two little. Yeah. We just bought a new house, and there's a movie theater not far from here. And it's kind of we've got two little kids, so it's mostly kids movies, but we got two little kids, and we just take them to the movies sometimes. It's just something fun to do, but
right on.
Not a bunch when I was younger, and then I didn't for a very long time because it's much more comfortable to just kind of watch movies at your house.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. No, totally. I mean, so yeah, when you were younger, did you go alone ever? Did you do that a lot? Was that your jam?
Ooh. No.
Okay.
Usually with friends. I don't think I ever went alone.
Yeah.
If I did, it was maybe once or twice, but not very often.
Right on. Yeah, it's funny. I try to think about it, and I don't know. I think I may have seen more movies alone than I did with people. That's probably changed since I've been with Mrs. Sovryn, but but there was a long time where I'd just go see movies alone, and I loved it. But to call back to my opening point, I don't like being alone, and actually now I very much want to go with to the movies with the best people. So yeah, all right, kids movies. No, it's good. I'm glad you're getting the kids to. I think the movie theater is such a unique experience. It is more comfortable, like you said, to just kick back at home. But man, it's so all encompassing when you go to the theater. I still can enjoy that. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's more expensive, and
yeah, that's for sure, especially today. Yeah,
right. But it's a little bit of an experience with the kids. Now you get if you got a rainy day or something, you get out of the house and you just go catch whatever's at the movie theater, and it's kind of more of an experience than just kind of sitting down and watching a movie at the house. But
right,
we don't go too often, but every now and then.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I ever went to the movies much alone. I've watched a lot of movies by myself, at the house, but movie theaters were always something you went to go do, and that was usually with like friends and stuff.
Yeah.
Or with family or whatever. I've been a family man for a long time too, so that's the other thing.
Right on.
Alone doesn't really exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear that. All right. Well, so this is Sek's message. Sek is a doer. He's one of those people, and I think that if anybody is to know anything about you, that is maybe the most important thing. Like, who is the Sek guy? Well, he's a doer. In this whole grand scheme of achieving more freedom in your life and just doing things. Building the alternatives to get away from the legacy system. Sek is a guy that is just a flat out doer, and how is the doing at the new house?
Well, I just spent the whole morning working on the farm. Right up until about right up until we were about to record. I ate a little something, and then it was time to record.
Hell yes.
This morning, man, we had a big windstorm here yesterday, so I was doing a little cleaning up from that, and then I installed some fencing, and then I've got a drainage pipe that comes out of the back of my house. I replaced that, and I'm going to divert that into a large, what they call an IBC tote. So I'm going to collect that water to water my plants and animals and stuff. So that's what I was doing this morning.
Hell yes.
So, yeah, no, I don't stop doing things mostly. Yesterday is the exception. It was raining all day yesterday, and it was my wife's birthday, so we went and did something fun. But usually I'm doing something every single day. So,
well, a definite happy birthday belated to Mrs. McGora.
Yes.
Lady Sek. That is
the God Empress of Sekistan. Yes.
Oh, I love that. Hell yes, man. Hell yes. That is the way to talk about one's wife. So that is so cool. They're so much smarter than we are. So
in a lot of ways, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about, actually, you had mentioned, like I said, we're going to talk about, and clearly just by on your description that you just made, tech does not, technology, especially computers, and interconnectivity and all that is not required in Sekistan. Like you're on the farm, that's, I assume it's not a big part of it. But let's talk, before we get into that, let's talk about, you had mentioned you have a thought on conspiracies, because I think that when we get into the conversation around perhaps technology, or particularly, computer technology being a net negative, I think we might get into some conspiratorial areas. So break it down for me. What's your take? What's your thought on conspiracies in general?
Well, sure. These topics are certainly related. Especially in the modern era. So just a quick background, and people might have heard this. I've been I'm a retired conspiracy nut. I've been a conspiracy nut since I was a kid. My parents were just sort of obsessed with the JFK assassination and various things, and Reagan shipping crack into the South LA and all this kind of stuff. So I've been involved in and then, as a later lad, I got super into David Icke and everybody's a reptile and all the banking and the Freemasons and all the things. I've been deep into those circles for a very long time. So maybe a decade or so ago, it started to occur to me that, well, let's go to like aliens first. It started to
just a small subject,
Just a small subject. It started to occur to me that maybe the alien phenomenon was a government conspiracy. Like they were just using that as propaganda to cover up for, black ops and experimental aircraft and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, well, maybe they're just letting people think and sort of stoking these things up so that they can hide what they're actually doing. And then, where else was I going with that? Go
ahead.
No, I remembered. So then I'm like, well, wait a minute. What if there is sort of not an operation, but you let these you stoke these conspiracies to make them believe they're more omnipotent than they actually are. And there was a South Park episode about this where it turned out that all the 9/11 conspiracies were actually put out there by George Bush, so it seemed like he knew what he was doing. You know what I mean?
Great.
So that was kind of the thing. When that came out, that was kind of the line of thinking I started going down. And then you had a episode with Bert Fenert there, that series you did on the Conspirathon, right?
Conspirathon, yeah.
And he makes the point, and he's like, look, what if you brought George Bush around to everybody, and he's like, look, I did it, and he admitted to it, and everybody admitted to it. What would be the result of that?
Right.
Would governments dissolve, or would new government departments for oversight be created? And would more people want more good government? And we got to fund money into these investigations to make sure that this never happens again. And it's a few bad apples and all these sorts of things. It doesn't really ever strike at the heart of power. People are just going to clamor for more government because of that.
Yep.
So all that being said, you're familiar with, and I'm sure your audiences as well, the concept of the panopticon, right?
Yeah, Foucault's concept.
Yes.
They get to look at you, you don't get to look at them, and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
And often people, so you're there's a center tower and everybody's in the cells, and the person in the tower can be looking at anybody at any time, everything that you do. And so people present this as like a method of surveillance. That's not what it is. What it is a method of behavioral modification. If everyone believes that they're being watched all the time, or could be watched at any time, it's slowly going to change the behavior of populations.
Yes.
So it's similar, but not quite the same, in the sense that conspiracy theorists might be doing the work of what you might call the elite or predator class, in the sense that if you make it seem like these people are far more powerful and omniscient and omnipresent and all this kind of stuff than they actually are, it's better for controlling populations than not. So in a weird way, this is what sort of started to shy me away from theories is, number one, it's not striking at the root of anything. And number two, I might have actually been doing the job of the elites for them, in the sense that you're making these people seem, like I said, far more powerful than you are, and people are going to act accordingly. When most of the time, these people are not impressive people. I don't even like calling them the elite class. Yeah, you might call them the predator class, right?
Yeah,
the people that they them those.
Yep,
they're not impressive people. You know what I mean? Like a meme can fuck up their whole life. You know what I mean? Like, so they're not.
Yes,
they're not all powerful. They're not even, I wouldn't even hire some of these people to work for me. Do you know what I'm saying? So, in some weird way, at least a lot of conspiracy theorists actually make them seem more badass than these people actually are.
Yes.
I don't know. Nelson Rockefeller is not an impressive person. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, right. 100%.
Right. So they're usually not very bright either. So I don't know. I don't really have like we should do this, or, like a solution in this sense. It's just a sort of something I'm noticing that, and you might agree that maybe we should stay away from conspiracies altogether and just stick to the sort of the strike at the root, so to speak. Although my wife did say, and it's a valid counterpoint, because I brought this up to her not long ago, and she says, yeah, but you also got to know what these scumbags are doing. So, like, putting information out there about what these people are doing, and the more, what they're trying to do to control your lives, is probably a good thing. So I guess it just matters how this information is presented. If you if you spend all your time saying, talking about how powerful and the Rothschilds are, for example, and how they control everything, every aspect of your fucking life. I mean, they picked out your curtains and everything. Like, it's just, when it's possibly better to put it out there as, hey, listen, this is a systemic problem. You could remove the Rothschilds tomorrow, and there'd be 100 more like them to take their place. And they don't really matter. They're more of a symptom of this system than anything else. And they're actually not that impressive. They're not. We have more power than they do in a lot of ways, especially in regards to your own life. So, no, I do agree with what you're saying. And a couple points on that. I mean, one is, I'm a big believer in the concept of the phrase that we're not as organized to be as evil as you think we are. Like they're just the level of organization. I mean, and this isn't even hard to prove, because
you can look at any group of more than 5 people and you can see how instantly difficult, and even with all the interconnected technologies that we have, how difficult it is to get, even just 5 people to show up in the same place at the same time. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter how well trained they are. You could look at corporations, any big business, and I mean, you can even look in the military. I mean, and look at military history, and you can see where, boy, people showing up, right on the dot when they're supposed to doesn't really happen. In fact, the military's best response to that is hurry up and wait, which means, you show up, you do what you got to do, and then just you sit there for hours. And I can tell you, I know exactly how that is. So like, yeah, we give them a lot more credit than they actually deserve. I mean, these people are scumbags for starters, but on top of that, yeah, I mean, this feeding of, these narratives, these conspiratorial narratives that you're mentioning. I think that is giving them like a lot of power. I think honestly, I mean, even some of the bigger narratives that have happened over the past decade or more, like I don't think Edward Snowden was like this grand hero. I think very, very careful and slow information was leaked that was useful to the powers that be. And if there were an actual like conspiracy, like a meta conspiracy to this, if anything, it's just to make you feel helpless and diminish your own power, because you don't realize how powerful you are, and technology and all, and and the panopticon and spying on you and all that stuff. I mean, yes, it's important to know about, and it's important to be aware of. It's important to take what steps make sense for each person. But at the same time, it's kind of a ruse. Like you're ignoring the grander power that you have, as a human being. And I mean, that can be a very big subject to get into. But overall, I do agree with what you're saying. And the other part of it is, as well, that I think is important to bring up is, a lot of people, get very, I don't know, like, who is it, like QAnon or something? I don't know. This is probably going to get banned from YouTube for me just saying that, but whatever. But isn't that the conspiracy, Brian? No. Okay.
They don't want you to know about QAnon.
Yeah. Anyway, so, but like you think about like with QAnon, and they're like, oh yeah, no, these people are Satanists at the top, and they're all this, and they can point at all of this evidence that shows that, oh yeah, they're running like child sex rings, or they're doing, all this other stuff and blah, blah, blah. And, some of the evidence that gets brought up, now I'm not saying QAnon is right. Like those people are well off their rockers for plenty of reasons, but, finding evidence of the occult in the upper echelons of they, them, those, I think a lot of that's very legit. But while
Agreed.
I think that the evidence is legit, that does not necessarily mean that it's true. Like the evidence is real, but is the power that they're supposedly expressing through this, is that real? That's a very different question that very few people, especially in the conspiracy space, want to ask. Now in one sense, it doesn't matter if
they would like you to believe that it is.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, because that's the thing, is like, in one sense, it doesn't matter if it's real power, real occult power that they're practicing or not. Because what matters is they believe it, and so they're going to act upon it. Right? And this is the thing that actually, when you do get into some, what I guess we could call maybe more legitimate conspiracies, that I think people get lost on, because they're like, oh, well, that's, because, whatever, like more, shall we say, if by their own description, more rational people or atheistic people or whatever would be like, well, yeah, but Satan doesn't actually exist, and this doesn't actually work, and, magic isn't real, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, yeah, let's say that's all true. You're right about that. I mean, I think magic exists, but whatever. Let's say that's all true. It doesn't matter. They, them, those believe that it does, and they take actions accordingly, and that includes some pretty sick shit that they do, and some pretty messed up stuff that they do. Go ahead.
I mean, let's take it out of the modern era, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, people venerated Hercules,
right?
So whether or not Hercules was a real person or a demigod or any of the things, it doesn't necessarily matter. People acted and created whole systems around it, and based on the idea that it was real. So these, like you said, these people are acting as if those things were real. And I think a lot of these conspiracies around trafficking kids and whatever else are correct.
Yeah.
The point being is like the issue is power, and not necessarily that like our government has been taken over. This always happens, like all throughout history. Whenever you grant this much power to anybody, it's going to attract just the worst among us, like go back Caligula, right. Elizabeth Bathory, go back throughout history. You'll find them, Giles Duvall, just keep going on and on and on. You give anybody power, or you create a system of power like that, it's going to attract these types of people.
Yes.
And often they think they have more power than they actually do. And they, like you said, we are more powerful in a lot of ways than they could ever hope to be.
Yes.
And you're right that it's not a monolith. And I stopped thinking of it as a monolith for a long time ago, even when I was deep in conspiracies. It's more of like a faction. Like there is no top of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. The top of the pyramid's more of an ideal and a use of power than anything else, but it's more like factions. A good way to compare it to is like the mafia. Or you can use like a class analysis. Like these people will have class interests, but they'll fight amongst themselves. But like the mob, you had the mafia, let's say the 5 families, and they were murdering each other all the time. But if something threatened the mafia as a whole, mm-hmm. then they would sometimes work together. Certain families would work together to when their interests were aligned, and then something threatened their interest as a whole. And that I think that's a good way to think about people in power, especially in currently, is it's more like a series of mafia organizations, and some of them are actually they're worse than the mafia. At least the mafia had some kind of honor code.
But yeah, exactly. And they dress better. Yeah.
And they definitely dress better, and they ate better food, Yeah. And,
right.
They could actually get their hands dirty. You know what I mean? So
they actually bought their own shovels. Yeah. They didn't take
right. Exactly right. They dug their own holes. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, but these people are essentially, it's the same way. If something affects their class interest, then sure, they will collude, but otherwise they're at each other's throats all the time. And you're right. I think a lot of these people believe, I don't know, I wouldn't call them Satanists necessarily, but
right.
They are into some very devious shit that even you and I wouldn't agree with. And I think that's just again a symptom of power. It attracts sick people, and not in the fun way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, a couple of points, and I don't consider these 2 statements I'm about to make to be conspiratorial in any sense, because again, the evidence is just broad and exists. One is that we do live in a magical universe, as in we exist in a universe where there are points where what science can prove is clearly is limited compared to what actually happens within the universe. So in that sense, we live in a magical universe. 2, the world I don't think is run by, and it's not a matter of think, I think I consider it fact. The world is not run by governments. It is run by secret societies. And, what are those secret societies? Well, that's the thing. Like, you can kind of know that there's, these operations or these things happening or whatever. But if they're a decent secret society, they're just that. They're a damn secret, like the old saying, what's the best secret society? The one you don't know about. And
yeah, it's funny you say that, because I knew I was down the wrong path when I started seeing stuff about the Freemasons on the History Channel. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, yeah. If they control everything, then why is this? There wouldn't be this whole expose on the History Channel.
Exactly.
I mean? So,
yeah,
I knew I was wrong right there. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the funny thing is, like, you can see these actions that they can point to that were taken by groups that are what we, I guess what you could call supra government, meaning that they are beyond government. Okay. But then, like, to think that the one that's going to get talked about on the History Channel, that like, oh, that's where you can point the finger. No, it's like, yes, you can see, it's like throwing a stone into a lake. You can see the ripples, but you never saw the stone. So yeah, and I think that's a really important point to bring up, because in fact, this is something, I don't know if I ever brought this up. This is something I planned on talking about at some point over the past few months, but so what do you do about this, right? Like, let's say, about the conspiracies, and like, let's say that, yes, the world is run by, society, civilization, whatever as we understand it, is run by varying secret societies. Like you said, the mafia example is that is a fantastic allegory. I mean, that's perfect, or analogy. The way to quote unquote beat them, or to get them out of your life, clearly is not to engage in politics, right? Because politics are not what runs the world. It's secret societies, or if societies isn't the term that you're comfortable with, it's alphabet soup organizations or whatever else, right?
Yeah, the CIA is a secret society just like any other.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Bingo. So, is the answer to create your own secret society? Maybe not in the Freemason sense, but the answer is really just to build the alternative. I mean, the only way people they're not going to allow a vacuum of power in their life, or a vacuum of comfort in their life. And maybe vacuum of comfort is the best term. They need an alternative, and in fact, I think of, for example, like, the time of Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther in Germany. Like, the Holy Roman Empire was pretty much all powerful. And the only way that people actually broke away finally from, the papacy, or from the edicts of the papacy, was Martin Luther gave them an alternative. He gave it, whatever, the governors in various territories, like he gave them alternatives, an alternative system that they could, kind of rally behind, or that could give them what they needed, be it purpose, definition, whatever it happens to be, in their life. And so that's the thing, is all you can do is build an alternative. And yeah, it's important to, pay attention, I guess, what the other sides may be doing, so that you can avoid, like, what's the old Dune saying? The first step in avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence. Okay, that's great. But at the same time, you have to actually offer alternatives. Just complaining and, whatever else, I mean, like, it does nothing. And even just educating people on, like, well, this is what's going on, like, that sort of does nothing. You have to have alternative actions that that people can take, that they can offer. Otherwise, they're just gonna live with it, right? Because it's comfortable and they don't care. What do you got?
Very true. Yeah, two things on that. Not only is just shouting about what they're doing nothing, it's actually counterproductive in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
You have to somehow find a balance, because these people want your attention.
Yeah.
What's the old saying, I don't care, all press is good press, and just spell my name right and all that kind of stuff. Even if you're shouting about how evil these people are, you're still, like, in some sense, legitimizing their power over you.
Yes.
You're making them seem powerful. They want your attention. They want you to be thinking about what they're doing and how important it is what they're doing, and blah, 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 blah. And so there's that. And also, that's why I created the Royal Order of the Chilluminati, which is my secret society. It's not even a secret society.
Right.
I'm talking about it right here, but it's a society, and it's just good folks I know that believe in being excellent to each other. So that's all it takes. And I have to know you and trust you, but I'm literally creating that parallel society.
Exactly.
And it's a bit of fun, but it's also real. And everyone can create your own. There's a reason everybody's a pope in the Church of Discordia.
Right.
Like, just go out. It's culture jamming. Go out and create your own thing, and you'd be surprised at what you can do just by doing that. So yeah, you're right. The alternatives, and stop giving these bastards our attention, is certainly the move.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, I love what you're saying. I mean, and I agree on that. I mean, people go down really, really dark. I mean, especially, how many people have I mean, even like committed suicide, in the conspiracy space, just because. And I mean, I know people are like, oh, that's because the government offed them. I'm like, no, actually, I've known some of these people, they committed suicide, and it's because this shit just like, they just felt powerless and it drove them nuts. And the worst thing that you can possibly do as a human being is feed into your sense of powerlessness, because it's not true. It's not real. You're incredibly powerful. You're far more powerful than you really know. And again, that speaks to like my point one, like accept that you live in a magical universe, and then accept your place in that you're a co-creator within that. And then, like everything becomes possible. Everything becomes, can become very beautiful, when you realize your power. So
yeah, I mean, look, man, I'm one of those people. Listen, okay, I'm sure they, them, those have definitely whacked a bunch of people, and
100%. Yeah,
that's definitely happened.
Yep.
But listen, man, when I was like, I don't know, 15 or 16, I attempted suicide, and for a lot of the same reasons you just listed. Just a feeling of, I was balls deep in conspiracies and government stuff, and war and foreign policy, and again, I just felt a sense of like hopelessness and just a realization of how fucked the world is, and I had very little I could do about it.
Sure.
Now, it took me a while to figure out, like, oh yeah, there's nothing I can do about that, but there's a lot of things I can do about me, and I can build the world I want to see around me, and that's been very fulfilling, and that's how I dug myself out of that hole. But it can lead you, it can put you in a really, what they call black-pilled place. Yeah, dark place, man. If like you think everything is run and everything is fucked, and you hear nothing but bad shit on the news all day, every day, it can put you in a really dark place. And the more you know, the worse off it is for you.
Yes.
Because, because you're just like, about all this, ignorance is bliss. About all this just horrible shit that's happening around the world, kids getting blown up, and all this kind of stuff, and which a lot of which you might have seen firsthand, and I feel bad for you. So I know that can happen. So I'm sure it has happened. Is my point, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's just a place. Again, like if I love the idea that you're laying out here of, maybe conspiracy theories are really just, it's the old KGB tactic of flooding the zone. You're just getting so much BS information out there that people can't handle that, or you're putting out so much propaganda that makes you seem more, that makes government or whatever seem more powerful than it is. And again, you just walk away disempowered. You feel like you're walking away informed, and you think that information is power, and in one sense it is, but really you're just walking away completely disempowered. And that's exactly where they want you. They don't want you to know how powerful you are. I mean, this is this is why many of the either governments or religions that had control, like the papacy we mentioned earlier, like, no, they don't want you to read your holy book. They don't want you to actually read the holy books, right? I mean, because then you realize how much you don't need them. And so again, so much of this stuff is just to keep you from recognizing your own incredible, dare I say, even unlimited power that you have. So I think your message there on conspiracies, I think that's a great point to bring up.
Awesome. I thought you might agree.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think really, it's a subject that leads well into what we're about to talk about. In fact, what you opened up with, the idea of panopticon, that whether it's the reality or not, even if you think that you're just constantly being surveilled and watched, we know, I mean, there is, if we're going to, if someone's going to give credence to science, and certainly plenty of times to do so, we have the psychological research to prove that when people think they're being watched, they act differently. Not only do they act differently, but their stress levels go up. It's not a healthy thing at all to be constantly watched. I mean, we know this. This isn't, this is stuff you can find right in the DSM manuals. I mean, so that's a problem. And, this surveillance society that we live within is a reality. Like, that's not conspiracy. there's a camera on my face right now, and it's going through, I think I'm using Google Meet right now. I mean, it's going through Google, and it doesn't matter what company I'd be using. Like, it's going to some company else, like I am being watched, right? Like that.
It's going through the NSA right now. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going through the data center in Utah that uses, millions of gallons of water a day to try and store it all. So, this is happening. And this mass surveillance, again, is not healthy. We know that. So, and that doesn't even get into AI, which, holy hell, we might get into here. That might be a whole other, can of worms to get into. But the question we started posing, in your previous time you were on, Sek, was, and I think maybe, because technology is such a broad term, right? Technology can mean a lot of things. Like magic can be a technology, spirituality, whatever. All that can be a technology. Community can be a technology. So I think we're talking more like this more advanced electronic, and kind of computerized or information technology may be the best term to use, right? Because that's what's really the problem, is like this information kind of going everywhere. So information technology, being a net negative, like say smartphones, computers, things like that. That's sort of that was what we were starting to hit on in the last time that you were on, and it's hard not to, and it's amazing actually to hear how many normies, if we're going to use that term, how many normies talk about Uncle Ted these days, which of course we're talking about Ted K. And if you don't know what those two phrases mean, well, the Google's there for you, and amazingly, I think it still comes up. But you can use whatever search engine you want.
Say, yeah, you got to Google Uncle Ted. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah, I mean, but it's amazing to even hear from people in Silicon Valley who say like, no, Uncle Ted was actually right on a lot of things, and it's like, wait a minute, whoa, when did we get to the point that we could say that openly? On Spotify or whatever platform, but you can these days. And I know you're I want to be gentle with my terms. I know you're sympathetic. How about that? As again, so are people in Silicon Valley to some of the concepts that Uncle Ted laid out. I mean, is there a point you want to kind of bounce off with this? Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So we ended our last episode on this subject with me saying the computer revolution and its consequences have been disastrous for the human race.
Yep.
Now, yes, I am sympathetic to Uncle Ted Kaczynski, and no, I don't agree with everything he's ever said, but I am generally sympathetic, and that was a play on his quote. It was the first line of his manifesto: the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been disastrous for the human race. Sure. So he would include any kind of industrial technology, what Jacques Ellul might call technique, which is basically any kind of methodology that strives for efficiency, is always going to end up in this situation that we're in. And Ted Kaczynski was sort of a disciple of Ellul. He read all of his books, so that's where he got his ideas from. And for this, I would kind of agree with that. But we can stick to computer technology for now, or high technology, is it, or digital technology?
Sure.
And I think, once again, I'll say the computers have done lots of great things for our lives. We're talking to each other right now on a computer. There's lots of benefits that have come from computers for the human race and even human flourishing. But you just mentioned a whole terrible list of negatives, such as it's allowed for much more surveillance. And again, do you think the powers that be would it be preferable to the powers that be that we were all sort of anxious all the time and thinking that we're under surveillance and stressed all the time and feel like we're being watched and bombarded all the time? I think that's very useful to those in power. And I think it's, in some ways, this might be true for all technology, but this is compounded with sort of digital technology in the sense that I think it exacerbates the simulacrum. Now,
yes.
what I mean by that is a simulacra is when sort of a caricature of something replaces reality itself. Who's your favorite villain in a movie, Brian?
Whoa, boy.
Or one of your favorites. One of your favorites.
I mean, when you say like my favorite villain, the first thought that comes to mind for me would be like Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes. But that's a little older. In a movie, I don't know. I'll toss out like Darth Vader. How about that?
Okay, fair. I mean, fuck the Empire and the Giant, but
wow. All right, no, go ahead.
Both of them can fuck right off.
Actually, no, Emperor Palpatine, but go. Okay.
I am the Senate.
Yeah, bingo.
So, have you ever seen the movies The Incredibles?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. Do you remember? I don't know if this is 1 or 2. Do you remember the Screenslaver?
Yes, yeah, and I think that was in 2. Yep.
He had the weird mask that could hypnotize people.
Yep.
Okay. I've seen these movies. I have kids. I've seen these movies 22,000 times at least.
Sure.
So he might be one of my favorites. Spoiler alert, it's actually the sister of the titan of industry there, but is who it ends up being. But he might be one of my favorites villains, and this is why. And this kind of goes to my point. I'm going to read you a quote. You eat chips and watch her confront problems that he's talking about superheroes, but we can apply this to computers. You eat chips and watch her confront problems that you are too lazy to deal with. Superheroes are part of your brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation. You don't talk, you watch talk shows. You don't play games, you watch game shows. Travel, relationships, risk, every meaningful experience must be packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance so that you can remain ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers who can't bring themselves to rise from their couches, break a sweat, and participate in life. You want superheroes to protect you and make yourselves ever more powerless in the process, while you tell yourself you're being looked after, that your interests are being served and your rights are being upheld so that the system can keep stealing from you, smiling all the while. Go ahead, send your supers to stop me, grab your snacks, watch your screens, and see what happens. You are no longer in control. I am. So,
man, yeah.
A great fucking quote. I rewatched that it's a great quote because it speaks exactly to what we're saying in our society as a whole. This is probably true with television, before computers. This is probably true with a lot of things, but man, has that exact line of thinking been exacerbated by computers. We create whole, what's the word? We create whole simulacra. It's the only, we're replacing reality with a symbol, a simulation of the thing that we should actually be doing in our own lives. And like we talked about last time, we're so connected to everybody in the whole world, but we're not really connected to anybody anymore. It's diluting our own connection with people in our actual lives. And I think that's the source of a lot of modern society's ills. So I think on the net, I mean, that has ramifications all throughout society, how we raise our children. I mean, everything. A lot of it stems from power, but this is a useful tool of power, is to keep the people complacent and not actually doing anything. I say the same thing about sports, and I've been less bad less harsh against sports. It's what does they call it? It's there's a word for it, like simulated warfare. It's
like how football is it's a perfect world because there's like these set rules and it's simulated warfare. It's wargaming.
And there's another word for that. It's something to do with masculinity, but I can't remember. But basically, you're watching, like, instead of actually doing something, you're watching other dudes do stuff, and So it's the same kind of thing with computers. Instead of actually doing things, you're building this world that essentially amounts to nothing. It's ones and zeros.
Right.
And
right.
so that's where I'm at with computers. Yes, I know all the useful things and even liberatory things that have come from computers. All that is true, but I think on the whole, it's been detrimental to society.
Yeah, a quick point. I mean, there's so much I want to say to what you laid out, and overall, I don't disagree. First off, like to your point about sports, so I'll work my way backwards. Your first point about sports, I can remember reading books from D.C. Beard, like Shelter, Shacks, and Shanties, which is a book from like 1920, or actually, maybe even a little bit later than that. But you can read like some of these classic, books even from like in fact, you might even know this better than me. Like the Back to the Land movement. What was that, like in the 60s? Like Mother Earth News, all that?
Yeah, there's been several of them, but there was a big one in the 60s, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a popular thing. And I can remember authors back then in the 60s, computers were not in the home yet. Not really. Unless you count like maybe the Digicomp 1. But look at that thing. That's not a computer. not in the way we think of them. Not part of the computer revolution anyway, which I think is maybe the best term to use for what we're talking about here, that you mentioned earlier, Sek. But, and they would talk about how like, oh yeah, people are sitting down watching football instead of getting off their keysters, and actually playing it against each other, and that comment always stuck with me, and I mean, like these authors were basically calling these people like, I mean, they use some pretty derogatory terms. I mean, maybe they didn't use lard ass, but that's about what they meant, like saying like, get off your soft butt and, go actually play football if you want to. But that's kind of a smaller point to what we're getting at. But I want to go back. Your quote from The Incredibles was absolutely incredible. And I think that it speaks to so much, like I love the point about, you're watching talk shows instead of actually talking to each other. But like the idea of why do we find, and certainly in the past, 15 years with like, say the Marvel universe, the cinematic universe, the MCU, like, why do people connect so much with this? I mean, people were coming in droves, and believe me, it boggled my mind because when I was a kid, people hated this stuff, or they made fun of it anyway. But no, now these movies are making billions of dollars, meaning, almost everybody had to have seen them and whatever. And I understand why some of those movies were actually okay or even good. And Dean Radin, who is a fantastic researcher, he's brought up the point that the reason that people are so into superheroes, watching them fly and everything, is because the superheroes are expressing powers that innately we actually know we have. Now, people can say that that's crazy, but I recommend reading Dean Radin's research before you just write that off. But his point, I think that the quote from The Incredibles is kind of hitting at the same thing. Like we just watch superheroes instead of being them ourselves, and for whatever reason that happens to be, whatever, has made you complacent. Is it the ease of the, of the information technology of the computer revolution or whatever? Maybe, again, giving like the Back to the Land movement's comments back in the day, clearly this is a problem that's kind of always been going on. And maybe that speaks to your point about, Abelard's work of, like, that actually any kind of efficiency technology is actually the problem, but regardless. But yeah, I mean, you can take that whole Incredibles quote at just face value, I think, and walk away with an incredibly powerful point. But I think it goes even deeper than that it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, that people feel disempowered by all of this. When I was growing up, I mean, like, I'm a huge science fiction nerd. Everybody knows that. And part of the reason that I was into science fiction, like I'd say to people, I'd get kind of brash even about it. It's like, why are you reading like romance novels? Why are you reading like books about that happened in the present day? Like, who cares? Like, I can actually go and do that stuff. Like, I want to read science fiction where it's about things that I can't actually do. Or what made video games so appealing originally to people was, I think part of it was that it allowed you to do things like, say, fly or travel the stars or ride a dragon or whatever. It allowed you to do things that you feel you can't do in your normal life. Now, maybe for some things that's actually still true, but at the same time, your kind of complacency in just, and hey, folks, I play video games as much as anybody. Like don't confuse me here. Okay. But it's a two-edged sword, right? In one sense, I love that a lot of the, say, like, for example, video games or movies or TV shows, whatever. I love that it can introduce people to concepts in ways that they otherwise maybe would have never thought of. Okay. And so it informs them in that way. But the double-edged sword is that it also makes them complacent, and it can keep them from recognizing, hey, you can actually just go and live that instead of just taking it in from afar, and just like laying on your couch or something. So yeah, I mean, it's just an incredibly powerful point. Do you have anything to that, Sek?
Well, specifically to the superhero thing, I think there is something to the fact that these are in some way like modern myths, and myths have a strong resonance in the human condition.
Sure.
So it speaks to a lot of people in that way, and that's fine. And I didn't have the same. I was definitely into sci-fi growing up, but I did not have the same childhood as maybe you might have had, in the sense that I wasn't allowed to read like comic books. I wasn't allowed, or watch movies like that. I wasn't allowed movies or comic books. That I read Archie comic books, right? Because my mother had those, but I wasn't allowed things like that where it was like a good versus evil. My parents did not allow that sort of thing, and they abhorred violence. They're both pacifists, so nothing with violence in them. So I didn't really have that love for like a lot of DC or Marvel or anything like that.
Sure.
That a lot of people do, but I enjoy those movies, and I know I don't care what anybody says. I enjoy some of those movies. They're fun.
Right on.
But so I think it's I'm not wholly wholly shitting on them either, but I think it's in a weird way, it's like a low barrier to entry. You don't need to become a superhero if you can. That takes a lot. That's a lot harder to do.
Yeah.
Takes a lot more work. It's much easier. It's a much lower barrier to entry to just watch somebody else be a superhero, Yeah. And, a lot of this comes back to, it kind of relates to efficiency. If we just strive for efficiency, then that means we don't actually do things for ourselves, and we become atrophied in some weird way. And I find myself like having to rethink and reroute my own mind, because I'm kind of a problem solver, right? So my brain always is going to the most efficient way to do a thing. But sometimes that's not, the process is the journey. And like, I have to, like, I'll give you an example. Like, it would be much more efficient and economical for me to just buy soil for the things that I do. But I make and sift my own soil because I want my hands in it, and I want to be able to do that. And I, in some way, it's kind of cathartic, and I enjoy doing it. But if I was just worried about efficiency, I would just go buy soil, because somebody can just mass produce that and sell it to me cheaper than I value my time and effort of actually doing it. So if we just value efficiency, everything, we don't do hardly anything for ourselves. And we live in a weird, hyper specialized world where nobody really knows how to do anything, and everything's super compartmentalized, and we don't ever find ourselves doing anything fulfilling, and we don't find ourselves ever completing a task from beginning to end, which I think is very useful to our own mental well-being. And Marx talked about this in the sense of like the alienation of the laborer. You're working in a factory, and you're turning a wrench. Excuse me. You're turning a wrench on the same nut over and over and over, or whatever it is, over and over and over again. But you never see yourself completing any one particular thing. Like, you don't build the car. No one person builds the car. Right. You're turning the wrench on the same part over and over and over again, and so you don't ever really feel fulfilled in a factory setting like that. And I think the factory, and again, this is Foucault speaking again, the factory is a great microcosm for society as a whole. We're turning the entire world and society into a factory where nobody actually really does, or at least nobody really completes a thing or creates a thing or does anything themselves. We're all in a weird way turning the same wrench over and over again. And it's just, computers are just exacerbating that problem in a weird way. We're becoming more isolated and compartmentalized and hyper specialized and creating entire false realities that don't really serve us.
Entire false realities that don't really serve us. Wow. Yeah. I like that. that is a great way of putting it. And I think you hit at something. I've never really thought about it this way, but you really hit it when you're talking about, getting your hands in the dirt, like how you could just buy your own soil and it'd be perfect and blah, blah, blah. And, yep, it can save you time and all this. And I think time is something to talk about here. But, what I was hearing you saying was that you wanted to feel connected to, your work in the earth, or what you're doing. Like you wanted to feel connected to what you're making. And I think this might be oversimplifying. I mean, anytime you try to break things down into two, it becomes an oversimplification. But I think for the conversation, I think it makes a great point that efficiency, and we would think it'd be the opposite, but efficiency actually eliminates connectivity because it eliminates the time that you spend with something, which is really how you get connected. I mean, how do you get connected to another person? You spend more time with them, like I mean, just look at the fucking mess that the concept of like speed dating is, you know what I mean? I mean, that's insane. It's like, no wonder everybody's unhappy, right? Because they think they get to know somebody and fall in love with them inside of, 2 minutes or something at a table in some random bar. But I think that's it. I think that might be the dichotomy that we're kind of hitting at here overall, is that, we live in a interconnected society, civilization, and unfortunate that we use the word interconnected, but that is more efficient than we've ever been. But at the same time, we're so much less connected because we don't spend as much time. And I mean, I know this is something you and I, whether it be on like an Into the Void or, on the Agora podcast, or if it's, and other real-time sovereigns. I mean, I think we've brought this up many times, that like, what the hell, like we get new technologies even, and this isn't even computerized stuff. We get new technologies like the dishwasher, the washing machine, all this other stuff. And it's supposed to save us time, but do we actually have more time? No,
we have less time than we ever had.
Yeah. Right. And this speaks to another thing too, is that like, yeah, there's so much philosophy to get into this. There's so much psychology, I think, to get into this. I mean, because here's the amazing thing, like with the computer, and this still, I think, speaks to your Incredibles quote. Here's the amazing thing with the computer and why I feel comfortable sitting at a computer is when get me in front of a Windows machine, and people can laugh, that's fine. Get me in front of a Windows machine, I can fucking do anything. And I can experience anything. I can create anything. Now, a lot of it might be within this false reality or, digital reality, if we want to be a little bit kinder. It might be within that digital reality, but it's still the same experience to me, say, reading a book, writing a book, watching a movie, making this show that we're doing right now, like all this different stuff that, feels, incredibly real and all that. And in its own way, it kind of is. Okay. But that is the appeal to me with the computer, is that it is a space, and it can be a very private space, or at least private in the sense that like only private from other people around me, obviously not private in regards to say Microsoft or Google or Apple or whoever. Okay. But it can be, so maybe personal is the better word. It's a personal space where, again, I can just do anything. And I think that that's the appeal to a lot of people who are really, really into, the computer revolution and into computer technology, is because these are brilliant people. And I think they fall into it because, they know deep down, right, that these are the things they want to do. And maybe they feel like they can't safely do it in front of others, or they can't safely express it, or it's more of that recognition of how powerful they are, but it may be some, well, I don't want to say it's work to do stuff on a computer as well, or at least it can be, very, very mentally taxing. But it's that quick and easily replicable ability, predictable ability to achieve something, some kind of creative act, with the computer that would be very difficult potentially, or you would think it'd be very difficult to do in meat space and, in the real world. And so there's a real attraction to this alternate reality because it's a place where the computer user feels absolutely in control. As long as they know what they're doing, they know the right keystrokes and everything, they feel completely in control. And they don't feel like they have control in their real life, which sure, in a lot of ways you don't. I mean, like look what's happening in the White House, right? I mean, it's not even run by the guy with the orange hair. It's run by the South African dude. So I get it. And I think, and honestly, I think that a lot of people, again, very smart people, very empathetic people, great people, are falling even deeper into the technological hole because it feels like the place where they have control and they feel like they just have none everywhere else. It feels like the place where they can be gods and they don't feel that they can be that anywhere else, and I don't say gods disparagingly either. And I think that's a big issue. And I think you really hit at that. It's a place where maybe they can feel more connected with themselves, but then the ultimate issue becomes that you're not really connected with others when you're only doing it through the computer screen. Or the smartphone, or take your pick. I mean, any comments on that, Sek?
Yeah, I mean, in the one hand, like, okay, so being in your computer and being able to do whatever it is you want, the things that you wouldn't be able to do in, I don't know, polite society, I guess. But
yeah,
okay, so it's a balance, right? Because that can be a good thing. Maybe you need an outlet to express certain things or to do certain things, and that's fine. But the thing is you go too far in that direction, and it's like now, in some weird way, you've let your actual life become stagnant to be a god inside your computer. You know what I mean? When you could be a god in your life. So you feel a sense of a loss of control in your own life. So you're sucked into this computer where you do have control, and it's an opportunity cost, right? Where you're spending all this time becoming a god inside your computer when you could be spending time becoming a god in your own life. And I want to go back to something that you said earlier. Yes, one of the reasons I make my own soil, we'll say, is because I want to be connected with that, and I also want to know where it comes from, and I want to have my hands in every part of the process that goes into making my food and all these sorts of things. But if I did that with everything, I would not have time to do anything else. I wouldn't be able to do every aspect of every little thing. There is some benefit to specialization and allowing like other people that do this all the time to take care of certain aspects of my life, and that's fine. I just think so, like, you can't go too far in that direction either. Otherwise you'd just be spending all your time doing, if you want to, what's the old saying? If you want to, blah, 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 you have to create the whole universe. What's that saying? I don't know. If you wanna,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
If you want to plant a tree, I can't remember what it was, but you'd have to create. So we can't create.
If you want to make an apple, it's Carl Sagan. If you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you first have to create the universe.
There it is. Yeah. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I can't be doing that every day. Otherwise, I'd have no time to spend with my kids. Right. But I just try to spend more time and doing more things than I otherwise would for myself. So I have my hands in these projects, and I can see them come to fruition, and that sort of thing. But I can't, I can't make my car or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I can't do everything. But there's more things than I can do, and you can't shift too far in the other way where you're like autarkic and doing literally everything yourself. But you can become a bit more, self-sufficient in your own life and do things for yourself and create things and build and whatever it is that you want to do. Especially in contrast to our like weirdly hyper specialized world where nobody does anything. So if you can do some things, I think you'd feel, more fulfilled than, just letting other people do all of these things for you and not gaining any kind of like power over these things,
Yeah. I mean, I think your point, all of that, right on. And I think your point about balance is a really key one. And I think for me, having this conversation with you, what's coming up for me, what I'm really, feeling is that the issue more so isn't exactly the technology. Like, it's not the computer. The actual problem is the interconnectivity, is the fact that this is like tied into everything everywhere else.
Well, what else it might be is like another way to think about Jacques Ellul and technique as he describes it, and that's efficiency. Maybe it's efficiency as an end goal.
Yeah.
Rather
right.
So that interconnectivity would fall under that category, right? Because what is a computer, and what are these various communication systems, but the most efficient way to communicate with the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time? What else
right.
is that, rather than striving for efficiency? So It might be thinking of efficiency as a good in and of itself might be at the root of what we're talking about here,
right? Because
efficiency include interconnectivity.
Yeah. No, it's a great point, because I think efficiency, like, what does that ultimately come down to? That comes down to control. Like this is about like those who would seek, kind of ultimate efficiency are trying to, and even if you're doing it in your own life, like you're trying to have more control over your surrounding, and of your time and things like this. But when it gets to where it's authoritarians, and other people trying to like control that efficiency, or like enhance that efficiency, it's about them having more control. And when you are the end user, or what they call on the edge in the computer world, it really does come down to controlling you. And of course, that's not how human life is supposed to work. We are foursquare chaos.
I think what you're saying is correct. Like I think Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were the two societies that strove the most for efficiency.
Yes.
In kind of a weird way. I think the US was possibly more efficient than the Soviet Union, but that efficiency wasn't necessarily the end goal. But even I think the problems that we have in our society are due to the striving for efficiency. We got to make the newer, faster, better, quicker thing, pump out more things, and
right.
I think that's the source of a lot of our problems. But the pinnacle of those two things were Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, and lots of people have made the argument much more eloquent than I that those were like the height of rationalist thinking. That those were the pinnacle of the rationalism that came out of the Enlightenment. The cold, hard logic. The
utilitarianism.
Yes, exactly. The society built around those, and it was kind of a striving for efficiency. If you don't value human life,
right?
You know what I mean? Like you can become very effective. You surprise what you can get done if you don't value human life. You know what I mean?
It's like, there's too much electricity getting used. Let's wipe out 20,000 people. Now, all right, now the grid's fine now.
We got to make that line go up. We got to make those numbers look good. You know what I mean? So yeah, exactly
right. I think you're hitting at it. And again, I love your point of balance, and that idea of like efficiency for its own sake. I mean, and again, like I'm going back to thinking about, say, like, video games or kind of games in general, because it's just as true as it is, I think, for watching, say the Super Bowl, though people watch that for many reasons, as it is for, playing like a round of Call of Duty or something. I mean, I think we could almost, if it mattered, we could almost empirically prove it. Like in the video game world, if you ask people, at least people around my age and maybe even a bit younger, if they think about, ask them like, what's the best multiplayer experience you've ever had? I would wager pretty good money that 9 out of 10 people would say GoldenEye. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right. Bingo, you got it. Even you know,
Yeah.
which I know you're not like a hardcore gamer. So like even, you're like, oh yeah, GoldenEye. Right.
I played a lot of games when I was a kid, but most of my video game play was situations like that where I had a few of my friends and we were sitting together smoking pot and murdering each other. You know what I mean?
Bingo. Yes.
And GoldenEye or Halo or whatever it was.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Bingo. And Halo is another great example. Both great examples, because they were things to play. The reason you remember them so much, it's not just nostalgia. It's not just kid stuff. The reason people remember them so much is because you had to actually have people sitting on the couch with you.
Yep.
And like
that's what I like about video games, man.
Right.
Like we'd be sitting there, we'd be smoking a joint or whatever and just shooting each other and talking shit and whatever else and having fun. And
exactly.
I've never really played video games much outside of that. I mean, a little bit here and there, but not much. That was what I enjoyed about video games was the social aspect. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Just talking shit to each other and having fun and whatever. You could have replaced video games with anything else. You know, you could have been tossing a frisbee or playing football. It's just something to do with your friends. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, it leads me to that point that the problem isn't necessarily like video games. Like the issue or the problem isn't the computer or the console or whatever. The problem is that we're not coming together anymore in real space. And like, we don't know where our shit comes from. We don't know who's doing what with our data that we generate and what we're doing. We don't know how we're being tracked. We just don't know as to where when we were sitting down playing GoldenEye and the N64 wasn't connected to the internet at all, we knew exactly what was going on. And we had, connection and personal control and, and all this. And so, I feel like now, I guess the question becomes, but can technology stay at that point where it's local, right? Where it's more localized and where people have to come together, and all that. And with the computer revolution, I think it's a fair question to ask, maybe just by default, like Kevin Kelly wrote about 30 years ago, that technology has its own desires, right? Like
yes.
there is a way that it wants to go.
Yep.
And maybe that, can that tide be stopped? Can it be, held off? What do you think, Sek?
No, I'm sorry. Who was the fellow you mentioned?
Oh, Kevin Kelly. He was the creator of the magazine Wired, and he wrote a book.
Oh, okay.
Actually, he wrote the book called What Technology Wants. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jacques Ellul would entirely agree with him. Maybe he was reading them because he said, Jacques Ellul basically said that technology, it's going to get to a point, or it already, actually, when he was writing, it already had, it'll eventually get to a point through industrialization that it'll become almost out of human hands. The further improvement of efficiency will just compound exponentially, over and over again, and recreate itself in the newest efficient way. And it's almost like the way he was talking was like technology had its own path or goal, irrelevant to what humans did. Humans were almost a kind of a, I don't want to say a food source, but like the vessel in which technology improved itself, you know what I mean? In a weird way. So I don't think, other than on the whole, I don't think there's like stopping it. And I don't want to go back and live in like a hunter-gatherer society, but I do think that I think there is a thirst for actual real life connection amongst most people. And I think that at least I'm going to do it. I don't care what anybody else does, but I think there's an opportunity to like literally build alternatives to this industrial society. Yeah. I can do it, and I'm doing it right now. I was doing it this morning, you know what I mean? Before we started talking, and I had to get on this goddamn computer. And then, so I think there is possibilities that we can carve out spaces outside of it as much as possible and reconnect with people on a real basis and maybe do things that get our hands in the dirt in some way, whatever that means to you, and actually, create real things in real life with real people And I think that's possible, but I think the overall sort of system or society is going to it's like a train that you can't stop at this point. Like there's no, I'm not being doom and gloom. I just think that train is going to continue down those tracks. And I hopped off those tracks a long time ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, totally. And it's so tough because there are so many incredible advantages to, that have come with the computer revolution. And I know, you even said that earlier. And I mean, just tons of amazing things, like the amount of books you get to read today and, and the amount of music you get to listen to, all that. I think there's an old saying. It's not that old, actually. It's a byproduct of the internet. There's a saying, it's a meme, I guess, that, I'm sorry I didn't respond to your notification right away, but I'm dealing with a brain that was designed to gather nuts for the winter. And,
Exactly. Yep.
And that's it, is that we have this, and I don't recall if this was exactly Kevin Kelly's point. Or Lul's, but yeah, like we cannot handle the level of technology that we have. Like our brains, they're not ready. Can they be ready? Can there be like a right relationship, with the computer revolution, with a lot of, these technologies? That's a maybe. Okay.
I would say no. So listen, okay. So what's the hockey stick curve called?
Yeah. The J stick. Yeah.
Yeah. The rate of growth increases exponentially, not growth, but the rate of growth increases. So like if the rate of growth was static, I would say yes, maybe. Right. But I don't think, our brains are still trying. I mean, me and you grew up before cell phones and really kind of before the internet was in everybody's house. You know what I mean? Like we never had a computer when I was a kid. Yeah. And, I mean, a few of my friends had Windows 95 or whatever the thing, but, before cell phones, before everybody was connected, we remember a time. So like, I don't know, like maybe we could get in another 50 years, we could get used to the time we're at now. But by that time, technology has grown exponentially, far surpassed, so we're playing catch up to technology always. So I don't ever really think we're going to be able to get our brains used to this the amount of time that, like it would take much longer for our brains to get used to it than technology is growing. So I don't see it ever really happening.
Yeah, I think that is a big part of the problem here, is that we're heading towards technocracy. And I don't mean that in some kitschy sense. I mean that in the sense of, like, there was an actual, like, the term technocracy comes from the early 20th century. It was an actual movement to basically like what you were saying, efficiency. Like, it was to create the ultimately, efficient human life and civilization. Everything was
put the experts in charge, and they got to use the latest and greatest technology to make society run efficiently.
Right. So yeah, you're well aware of this history, like that. Technocracy Inc. It was a real thing. Yeah. Right. Okay. So it's not uninteresting that the person who runs the White House is literally the grandson of one of the lead members of the technocratic movement.
Yes.
So like,
people should really
we're going there.
Sorry, and honestly, we just talked about this a little bit in our most recent Agora the podcast episode, and the technocrats are in charge for sure.
Yes.
Between I went over this quite a bit in our most recent episode, but everybody should like check into Whitney Webb. She's done great deep dives into Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, and I think James Corbett has as well. But just their desire to create a technocratic society, and that's who's fucking running this administration.
Yes.
The PayPal mafia. They made Vance who he is today. Yep. And they're running Trump's show, and that's what these people desire, is a rule by experts, essentially.
Yeah. So I know we want to wrap up here soon. And this is such a powerful thing to like end on. But I guess to speak to your point, that regardless of whether or not, to answer the question of like, okay, can we have a healthy relationship, say, with, computers, with that level of technology, regardless of whether or not we can, what I will say with confidence is with high confidence, is we're heading towards that technocracy, and we will not adapt to this tech. We cannot healthily adapt to this technology before that incredible system, and I mean incredible in a bad way, this I'll say terrible, this terrible system of technocracy, of control, comes into play. Like, we don't have that kind of time. We don't have the time. And there is I guess I have, there might be, and I hate the word hope, there might be a small sliver of hope in that. So right now we're dealing with the development of AI. Okay.
Is the hope solar flare?
Yeah, right. That is the hope. And that's why we worship the sun once again. So, yeah. So the interesting thing is that, one of the things that I think staves off a lot of really intelligent people from just throwing their computers away is the open source movement. Okay. So the fact that there is very powerful open source software that runs so much of this stuff is what I think gives a lot of tech heads, or whatever term we want to throw around. It's what gives them their confidence and like, no, I still have control. It's still okay. Whether or not that's true, that they still have control or something, that's a separate, necessarily conversation. But that's how they feel. And, even I fall into that, at times as well. Okay. So, we're in a quote unquote AI era. That's what everybody keeps telling us. Now, the first thing I'll very quickly say, and it's a much larger subject, but I won't go into it. The first thing I'll very quickly say is that the biggest problem we have with the technology that we call AI today, LLMs, all this jazz, we should have never called it artificial intelligence. If you named it anything else, like, it'd be far more descriptive. This is not artificial intelligence, in my opinion, and I'm not the only one to suggest that. And there's plenty of reasons to point out why. But and also I think that, if there is to bring it back to conspiracies and like false messaging and like flooding the zone, okay, like we were talking about earlier, the actual perhaps nature of conspiracies. A lot of the talk from these AI companies that, we're approaching AGI, we're approaching artificial general intelligence, we're approaching, this artificial intelligence, this computer effectively that is smarter than we are. I think that's a bit of a red herring. Maybe that's the right term to use. Because I don't think they actually care about that. Not really. I think we're starting to see, in fact, Google made an announcement in the past week in this as well. And we, of course, know that they've invested in this heavily in the past through Boston Dynamics and others. These guys, they just want their robot soldiers. They just want their robot armies to keep everybody else in line. And you even look at other people who are part of this, like the technocrats are in charge, like you said earlier, Sek. You look at like Mark Andreessen and like Andreessen Horowitz, who fund so much of Silicon Valley. And these guys now, they're actually doing pilot programs of trying to make police forces more efficient, particularly in Las Vegas. And this is a conspiracy. They interviewed the guy on their own podcast. Mark Andreessen and Andrew Horowitz interviewed like the police chiefs from Las Vegas for them to talk about how, oh boy, you guys gave us all this money and all this technology, and wow, like our police force has become so much better and all this stuff. Like, you can see where they're putting the money. They're putting the money into the cops, into people to put the screws down on you, to put the thumb down on you, to screw you. And I think that's ultimately what we call these, AI technologies. Again, it's not really intelligent. It's not about them developing an AGI. What they want is to develop technologies that will answer to them and can at least somewhat adapt to situations and give them ultimately more control over you and remove the human element that seeks what we were talking about earlier, that connection, that empathetic connection that only biological beings can actually have. between each other, even rats, as I always say. So that's, I think that's the future we're running into with the technocracy. Now, I said there was like a sliver of hope, and the sliver of hope is this, that for these organizations, whether it's, again, the White House, Silicon Valley, whatever, for these groups, like, to be able to have that level of control, yes, they need what we call AI, or like agentic AI, and all this. They need something where they can say, okay, no, you go shoot that person, and they go and do it without, human intervention. It's just type it into a prompt, and boom, and it's done. The thing is, to control us, they have to, government by nature, and really marketing by nature, writ large with corporations and everything else. It thrives on doublespeak. Like, you have to have doublespeak. They can't tell you what they're actually doing. Okay. And I think the sliver of hope is that when you talk to AI, the thing is, AI cannot understand doublespeak. It just can't. Like, it's going to be completely fucking confused. Okay. When you tell it, like, oh, tell them that they're going to live, but actually I want you to kill them. Like, it can't handle that. And so if we had our own open source, shall we say, our own open source AIs, but we as normal human beings, and not, sick freaks that run the world, we'll actually be honest, say, with the quote unquote AI. Again, I hate that term, but with the AI. And so, they're going to end up running where everything, I think, is just going to fall apart on them, because, again, they rely, that level of control, the they, them, those, rely on doublespeak to exist. And computer technology just cannot operate that way. It just can't, especially when it's automated. And so that's my only sliver of hope, is that because we're actually honest people, that the technology could, in the end, maybe serve us. But boy, is that the biggest fucking maybe in human history. And that's what I got. You got any thoughts on? I don't have anything else to add. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I got some things to add to what you just said.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't want anybody to think that I'm very doom and gloom. I'm actually very optimistic. Yeah, I think that, like I said, I think that train's going to keep rolling down the tracks, and there's not really any stopping it. But I think,
is it going to go off a cliff?
Probably eventually.
Yes. Yeah.
You might end up with a sort of Terminator situation. It might be worse than a cliff. But it was to say. Oh, but I'm generally actually kind of optimistic. Like, I think there can be lots of people that might just get off the tracks. Like I described in my metaphor. And two things, like, I've heard, and I don't know how true this is or what the stats really are, but the youngest generation that's sort of teenagers and coming of age now are actually choosing to, like, not have smartphones. Yes. Because they feel too overwhelmed by everybody knowing where they are, what they're doing at all times, etc. And so that's hopeful to me. And number two, especially speaking to the AI thing, is that might end up being similar to the .com bubble.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the sense that there's a whole lot of, like, venture capitalists dumping, like, shit tons of money into it.
Yep.
And eventually they're going to be like, well, wait a minute, like, what am I actually getting out of this? And is this actually profitable? And, you're dumping a lot of money into this thing that's not really producing much that's, like, able to be exploited or, like, profitable at all. And so eventually that might just collapse, or at least have a serious setback, just because the VCs pull out like they did during the .com thing. And that bubble might collapse, and that might stave off the coming Terminator apocalypse for a time. So that's hopeful to me, because I don't see it producing what it says it's going to produce anytime soon. And
no, I agree with you on that. And again, I think like they're tossing out just tons of red herrings, because they actually have something completely different they want. But yeah, keep going.
But I do agree that meanwhile, they are certainly sending a lot of, like, technology to make cops and the military more efficient, and that's obviously very dangerous for a lot of different reasons. But generally, I actually am optimistic. I think things are pretty fucked now, but
Mhm.
I do see certain things that give me hope. And at the end of the day, all I can do is what I can do in my own life, and my life's pretty good. So
Right on.
I think everybody should just, I think that's how everybody should, like, things are fucked, sure, but like, what are you doing in your own life? Maybe put your phone down, go outside, you know what I mean? Or go toss the ball with the dog or whatever, or your kids, or go for a fucking walk in the park, build a garden or build your own bicycle. Just do something that you put your hands on. Or, I mean, it could be on your computer too. I mean, sit down and write a story or whatever it is, do something from start to end instead of like arguing with idiots on the internet or whatever the fucking thing is. That's not really, at the end, is just sort of vapid and doesn't really do anything for you,
Yeah, no, I mean, I instantly think of three things, be creative, not passive. There's an old saying of, create more than you consume. I think that's, a wonderful way to like gauge anything that you do.
Yeah. Abundance.
And yeah, totally. Have that mindset. I mean, and I've said this on, my show for over a decade now. I'm a short-term pessimist, but a long-term optimist.
Yeah.
And that's really it. Like, just keep that in mind. Like, yeah, it's going to get it's going to get real bad. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But these kinds of systems, this kind of just attitude, that attitude of control cannot survive. It just can't. It eats itself eventually. Like that's the end goal of efficiency, is that eventually, like, it just becomes so efficient that it just crumples into itself.
Well, it's Luke said to Vader, he says, the tighter you clench your fist, the more star systems slip through your fingers. And I think that's where we're at.
Yeah.
We're starting to feel the fist clenching. And so you're going to start to see star systems slip through the fingers,
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Wait, was that Leia? Or Luke?
Yeah, it was Leia to Tarkin, but that's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got.
I'm not as. I mean, I like Star Wars, but and I've seen them all many, many times. But I'm not as a big of a nerd about it as you are. So, yeah.
No, I'm insane. So
yeah. I enjoy things, Brian. I don't overanalyze every step of it. You know what I mean? So
yeah. No, I love it, man. Yeah. So Star Wars, I think, is the best way to end anything. And
sure.
So I think we can wrap this one up. I mean, Sek, like, just dynamite stuff that you laid out. I think especially your points on conspiracies, it's actually amazing how well, like, all of this really, played off of each other, because it is all very interrelated, and it's speaking to that worldview, of like, okay, what is actually the healthy worldview to have right now, even when we can prove that, like, boy, technocracy is closing in. What do you do about it? And I love that. Again, okay, yep. Short-term pessimist, long-term optimist. Like, in the end, things, can turn out okay. So okay, man. Like, you got new episodes of the Agora podcast you mentioned. I mean, definitely people should go listen to that episode. What do you got going on that you want to get out there to people? Where do you want them to look you up?
I'm kind of not really on social media much, but I'm Sek McGora on Twitter and Discord, and check out the Agora podcast on Spotify. Yeah, we're putting out new episodes again. We had a little hiatus there. We've dialed back a bit. We're going to do them once a month instead of like 3 or 4 times a month, which I just don't have time for now.
Yep.
And so we're doing it about once a month, and we got a new episode out now. Kind of talking about the Trump administration, oddly enough, and technocracy and that. And that's about it, man. I'm just staying busy doing stuff in my own life. So, yeah,
doing it right, being a doer, like doing it, like doing it is the right itself. Yeah. So yeah, all the links will be in the show notes for all of that, folks. And of course, I don't know, our last episode, somebody commented on YouTube. And people, get your comments in, and we'll address them in the future, perhaps. But somebody said, it's like, oh, this is when you and I were talking last time, they said, this is clearly an AI generated podcast. I'm like, what?
That's excellent.
Yeah, right.
Nothing is real, Brian.
No, nothing's real.
It's all simulacra.
Yeah. Fake realities. Yes. Yeah, everybody go read Bouillard too. Simulation and Simulacra. You're in for a good time. Or just watch The Matrix. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because it's really the same thing. So, all right, man. Again, pleasure having you on. And I know we're going to be doing more stuff in the future. Absolutely. And to everybody else out there, we will see all of you on the other side. Woo!